I Have a Bad Feeling About This by Jeff Strand. Chapter 27. As the second tire deflated, Mr. Strand screamed for Chad to floor the gas pedal, which he'd been doing since the first arrow. The truck went out of control and smashed into a tree. Well, 3 trees, to be accurate. "You idiot!" Mr. Strand shouted, as if it were Chad's fault that the forest contained inconvenient placed vegetation. "At least they don't." Ethan's sunshiny and optimistic observation, whatever it might have been, was cut off as a rifle struck the windshield, spraying glass bits all over them. Another rifle hit the front hood. "What are they doing?" Mr. Strand demanded, because the answer of flinging weapons at our vehicles seemed too bizarre to be the correct answer. A canteen struck the driver's side window, cracking but not shattering the glass. "I'm getting out of here," shouted Chad, throwing open the door. He knew Mr. Strand would fire him, and then send other associates to kill him, and then send other associates to kill his family. But he couldn't just let himself get clobbered to death by weapons thrown by geeky teenagers. That was no way to end what had been a pretty decent career in the criminal arts. Chad got out of the truck just in time to be bonked on the head by a canteen. It wasn't filled with water, so it was more embarrassing than painful. Then a rifle butt hit him in almost the exact same spot, which was more painful than embarrassing. Chad clutched at his head and ran. Another canteen got him, this one striking his fingers right where they clutched at the rifle wound, which did not feel good. Another canteen missed his head but landed right where his foot touched the ground in his process of running, causing him to make a noise that was not representative of any of his standard dignity. He fell, somehow managing to bash his head in the same place. Instead of lying on the ground and crying till the police showed up, which sounded like a nice plan at the moment, Chad got back up and staggered forward, wishing the world would come back into focus. He stumbled and fell again, which should not make things less blurry, and then got back up and continued staggering, praying that another canteen would not hit him. Something else smacked him in the head. It was a water purification kit, although Chad was too dizzy to know that. He continued running, looking for sanctuary, any place he could be protected from this onslaught, though he would never ever admit this to anybody. He wanted his mommy. There, a building just ahead. Safety, sweet, sweet safety. He barricaded himself in there until he felt his own sanity begin to return. Chad opened the door to the barracks and slammed it closed, behind him gasping for breath and almost sobbing with relief. They couldn't find him here. Nobody could find him here. He was safe. 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 Giggling over stuff that wasn't funny made Neutron crazy. He was pretty sure it did. But being locked inside his own giggly mind was better than the situation in the real world, so he was okay with that. Something chirped. It sounded like a bird, though in his current mental state, it might have also been a rhinoceros. He looked around the barracks, however. His vision was still blurry, and he couldn't see anything except a little dot that seemed to get bigger and bigger until... "Aye!" Chad remarked as the bird began pecking at his face. He ran around flapping his arms as if he might be able to fly too, until he crashed into a cot. He fell to the floor and hit his increasingly fragile head once again. This time, his brain said, "Okay, I've had enough of this," and shut down into unconsciousness. This was nice for Chad, because otherwise he would have felt it as Randy's bird pecked at his head. The bird had had plenty of rest over the last few days, and didn't get tired of doing this anytime soon. "He left us," Ethan wailed. "He left us." "We don't need him," said Mr. Strand as about a dozen small rocks hit the truck at once. Jackie didn't think that Mr. Strand and Ethan would just let him excuse himself and leave the truck, but he felt that this was probably a good opportunity for him to take advantage of the chaos. So he grabbed Mr. Strand's nose between his index finger and thumb and gave it a great big twist. Mr. Strand howled in pain. Jackie began punching Mr. Strand in the stomach over and over again. Then a rock hit him on the shoulder, and he realized that his friends were not necessarily the most accurate projectile hurlers in the world. An arrow sailed past his face, and he yelped. Henry lowered the bow. He'd gotten overconfident about his arrow shooting abilities and almost skewered Jackie. That wasn't cool. He needed to remember that he was still basically incompetent and plan his moves accordingly. As far as Henry knew, there was a gun remaining in play, but Ethan didn't seem to be taking advantage of that. "I'm going in," said Eric, holding up the gun he'd stolen from Mr. Grant and then rushing out into the road. "Freeze!" Eric shouted, sounding like he practiced it in the mirror every morning. "Let Jackie go!" Ethan did not freeze. He opened the passenger side door and then fled, speed limping back towards the building. Clearly, he felt that Eric would not shoot him in the back. Henry hoped Eric wouldn't shoot in the back. That would end things on kind of a downer note. I'm going for him," said Randy. "What?" Henry asked. "Why?" "Because he's a loose end. If we let him run away, the tables could turn again and somebody else could get kidnapped. Could be you or me getting kidnapped next, and I won't allow that to happen." "Don't you think we're more likely to get kidnapped if we go after him instead of just letting him run away?" Randy considered that. "Come on, Henry. Everybody else got their big moments. 2 of them ran away. Were you going to go after both of them?" No, just one. I mean, I'm not dumb." "He's right," said Monica. "Who, me or him? How about which part?" asked Henry. "Can I finish?" "Yes." "Randy's right." "About not being dumb?" asked Randy. "We need to take them out now. Henry, you keep Eric covered while he keeps Mr. Grant covered. Randy and I will go after the other 2 guys. Henry didn't like the idea of them splitting up. But they had a point. It was best to finish off Ethan and Chad while they were at their most laughably pathetic. "All right," he said, "but promise me that Monica will go after whichever one is harder to beat." "I promise," said Monica. Then she gave him a kiss on the cheek, and she and Randy hurried off. Henry just stood there stunned. She'd kissed him. The location and duration of the kiss weren't anything more than he'd expect from his grandmother, but still, she'd kissed him. She didn't consider him a repulsive triangulite, even if it wasn't a mwah, 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 slobber kiss. He could now say that he had been kissed by Monica. He could die now, happy. Though he preferred not to die now. And in fact, it was probably best for his continued survival if he stopped thinking about the peck on the cheek. He hoped there was a lipstick stain there as proof, though Monica didn't look like she was wearing lipstick, and focused on the extremely dangerous events unfolding in front of him. Mr. Grant got out of the truck, holding Jackie in front of him by the hair. "Let him go," said Eric. "Put the gun down or I break his neck," said Mr. Grant. "I'm serious. Let him go or I'll shoot." "You think I can't snap this little twerp's neck like a toothpick?" Mr. Grant asked. "Drop the gun, now." Henry notched the last of his arrows. Jackie was pretty short, so both he and Eric had a reasonably clear shot at Mr. Grant, but neither of them were professional marksmen. What if he took the shot and hit Jackie instead? When people wrote about their amazing victories, the stories would contain an asterisk, like the world records held by disgraced athletes who used performance-enhancing drugs. Henry shot his friend in the face with an arrow by mistake. So it's important to note that when you take out all the elements into consideration, he's not all that awesome. In fact, Jackie's parents thinks he pretty much sucks. Also, while Henry and Eric were all like, "Oh no, Jackie is dead," Mr. Grant escaped, and he was so mad that he went on a killing spree. All of which we can safely blame on Henry as well. One of the people who died would have become a legendary pediatrician, saving the lives of hundreds of children. Henry, if you're reading this footnote, you're a total douche. Henry is not reading this footnote, though, because an angry mob stormed his house and carried him away. Serves him right. Henry couldn't tell if Eric was going to lower the gun or not. Mr. Grant twisted his handful of Jackie's hair, making him wince. Now, Eric, do you want his death on your conscience?" Eric did not look like he was going to lower the gun. Eric was closer to the villain, but from Henry's angle, a much larger section of Mr. Grant was exposed. Henry needed to take the shot. He envisioned a tiny little target on Mr. Grant's side with an arrow above it pointing down and flashing signs saying, "Shoot here." He shot the arrow. It took about a thousandth of a second for Henry to realize that this arrow was not going to hit the target. Eric cried out and dropped the gun as the arrow went right through his arm. Henry gasped. That was not at all what he'd meant to do. Since he was the only one with the bow, it was going to be difficult to pretend that he didn't do it. Eric dropped to his knees and screamed in pain. Mr. Grant shoved Jackie aside and went for the gun. Henry rushed out of the forest. Though he never admitted it to any of his co-workers, this was not the first time Ethan had been defeated by scrawny teenagers. It wasn't even the second time. If he survived this, Ethan vowed that he would never again go near anybody between the ages of 13 and 18. They brought nothing but misery to his life. He limped through the building, trying not to think about how much his face hurt. Facial hair was not supposed to be ripped out like that. Not that he could tell anybody how much his face hurt, or they'd say, "Your face hurts? Well, it's killing me too." He knew they would, and then they'd laugh and laugh as if they'd made the joke up themselves. The buildings were too obvious of a place to hide. Nobody would be stupid enough to choose them. So he hurried past them, figuring that he would just limp through the woods until he found civilization, or until he ran off the edge of a cliff and fell to his death. No, wait, an outhouse. Nobody would look for him in an outhouse. He opened the door, went inside, and then quickly shut the door behind him. The aroma was not the finest he'd ever inhaled, but it wasn't the worst either. And as long as nobody needed to actually use the facilities, he could wait here until things calmed down. But what if somebody did need to use the outhouse? What if it was that violent girl? Ethan didn't think he could handle another beating. He lifted the lid and gazed down into the darkness below. He now had a very important decision to make. What he chose to do next could save his life, but it could also haunt him until the end of his days. He didn't want to go to jail. Could 2 or 3 days down there be worse than spending the rest of his life in prison? He could always get therapy. He said a silent prayer and then lowered his right foot into the hole. What was that? Had that sound come from down below? Ethan froze, listening carefully. Was something slithering down there? Ethan continued to listen. He thought he heard a soft rumble, like some unearthly beast was rising from an ancient slumber. What sort of nightmarish creature lurked beneath his feet? If he'd proceeded with his original plan, he would have been devoured. Or was it possible that this outhouse was the portal to the very pits of hell? No, he whispered. He'd never felt such a fear, such terror. This outhouse was a place of great evil, a structure into which nobody should ever venture, and the only way to save humanity was to burn it to the ground. He realized that the tears were streaming down his cheeks, but he didn't care. There was no shame in weeping in the presence of something this scary. He was standing near things that no human being should ever stand near. The slithering down below continued. Ethan pulled his leg out of the hole, imagining a tentacle reaching up to wrap around his ankle and pull him into the darkness. He screamed 1,000 screams as he threw open the door and rushed out of this accursed house of the devil. Randy smacked him in the head with a very large branch, and Ethan went to sleep for a while. Wilderness survival tip. To ensure that you don't get lost in the woods, be sure to pack a large supply of battery-powered flashing light up this way signs that you can fasten to trees on your way. The extra 8 to 12 hours that this adds to your hike is a small price to pay if it stops you from spending 9 to 13 hours wandering around lost.